Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. Today's guest is the remarkable advocate and leader, Jodi Finkelstein, Executive Director of the Montgomery County Commission for Women, and so much more. Jodi, thank you so much for taking time to chat today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to kibitz with you.
Yay. So I want to cover so much.
Sure.
First off, briefly, so folks know your background, you got an undergraduate degree in sociology at Ithaca and a master's at University of Maryland
Correct.
in social work.
Correct.
And then virtually your entire career has been oriented to women and
Yep.
advocating for women and women's services. So let me just start. What in your childhood or your education got you focused on being such an amazing advocate for women and women's issues?
Well, thank you for the compliment. And actually, it wasn't so much anything in my childhood per se. It was more when I went to graduate school, and in my first semester, I saw the end of a drive-by shooting. So that really shook me to my core. And immediately following social work school, I wanted to work on gun violence prevention, and I found a very small nonprofit called Build the Missing Peace, who it was run by Julie Ellsworth at the time. And unfortunately, it did not last a very long time as a nonprofit, although it had tremendous impact. And from there, I found a part-time job at the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence, and that started me on my path to be able to advocate for women.
So we are going to do that here. So MNADV, the Maryland Network Against Domestic
Yeah,
Violence,
sorry. Yeah, thank
is a
you.
very effective advocacy organization in Annapolis. You worked with the Attorney General, you worked in the Family Violence Council, and
Yeah,
then for 4 years you ran NARAL, the Pro-Choice Maryland, and I worked at National NARAL, the
yeah.
National Abortion Rights Action League, a very long time ago. And women's
Mm.
reproductive choice is such an enormous issue. So
Yeah.
let's stop there before we get to the Commission for Women. So you worked for women's reproductive choice, abortion rights.
Yes.
Would you have foreseen in 2011 to
No.
2015 that we'd be where we are?
No, absolutely not. If somebody had told me then what was going to happen now, I would have completely laughed as opposed to crying, what, 20 years later. And that job was especially important to me for a variety of reasons, mostly because it's just so incredibly important that women have a right over their own bodily autonomy. And that job taught me a lot of things. It taught me not only about advocating, but especially advocating for an issue that many people, especially even in the state of Maryland, are not particularly fond of. So I definitely grew a thicker skin, and believe it or not, people called me a Nazi, even though I happen to be Jewish. So that was very painful and hurtful in many different ways. But at the same time, I got to meet some incredible women who told me their very personal stories about why they chose to adopt or why they chose to have an abortion or why they chose to a parent, regardless of their situation. So that job I still hold near and dear to my heart, although it was somewhat painful for me personally.
Yes. So what was the biggest issue you were working on then? Because it wasn't fundamental legality of abortion rights. So were you focused more on funding or access or service or?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thinking back, because it's been a minute. Thinking back, I think there are a couple of things that I was working on. One, it was the crisis centers, the pregnancy crisis
Hold
centers,
on.
and
We have to put air quotes. And
oh yeah, sorry about. Well,
for,
I was going to explain. Yes, the
okay.
crisis pregnancy centers in Montgomery County, which are um, organizations that say that they support women who are pregnant by providing them comprehensive information about their choices with unintended pregnancies, which is certainly not the case. So they
It's
often
so
lie.
misleading.
Yeah,
And
go ahead.
just for anyone who's listening on Apple Podcast and can't see our air quotes, these are just outrageous, misleading, bait and switch
Yes.
institutions that lure women in who think they're coming in for abortion care, and then they are shown horrible pictures, they are brainwashed,
Correct.
they are threatened, they are so. so go more from there. And they were around the
They're
state.
given erroneous information about
Yes.
various pregnancy stages, about what the law is, about what their choices are, and they often place themselves near legitimate abortion clinics,
Yes.
makes it even more confusing for many of these women. So that was one of the main things that we had worked on. And then the other thing that we had worked on is being more proactive in providing access to women, and particularly in the state of Maryland. So I remember it being somewhat of a challenge for me because in other states, and still those states are challenged with access to reproductive health, such as Texas or Alabama. Some of their other executive directors were saying, we need to be more productive, which I understood, and we were trying to be more proactive to
Yes.
provide even more rights
Yes.
to individuals in the state of Maryland. So fast forward 20 years later, Maryland continues to be a leader in reproductive health and
Yes.
reproductive rights. And while I am not actively in the pro-choice movement by being the executive director there, I do a lot behind the scenes, which I'm very proud of. And
Absolutely.
very thankful for working with so many wonderful people, including yourself.
Thank you. So the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision, which basically overturned Roe v. Wade, the decision that legalized abortion option, came down. Do you happen to know whether the quote unquote crisis pregnancy centers still exist in a post-Dobbs world? Because I actually don't have any idea.
I would have to look into that. I do remember looking into a few websites maybe about 2 years ago, but I
Yeah.
haven't seen it. I haven't
Mm.
seen it since. But I would think that they would probably be even more, I would say, aggressive in
Yeah.
states that have full reproductive rights, such as
Yes.
Maryland. So I'll
Yes.
have to check into that. Thanks for asking that really
Interesting.
important question. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, let's go to the main meat and potatoes of our conversation here, which is you have been executive director of the Montgomery County Commission for Women for almost 10 years.
Yes. Yes.
So thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your service. Why
Thank
don't
you.
you start with just the basics? What is the Commission for Women? What do you do and why is it important? Why should anybody care that it exists?
Sure. So one of the basic things that I want to share is that what a privilege it is to serve in this position. I grew up in Montgomery County, went to public schools here, and to be able to give back to the constituents and to government that provided me with an enormous education. So I just really wanted to thank the county for allowing me to serve in this position.
Nice.
And second, we were formed in 1972 in order to advocate on behalf of women on the local, state, and national level. Most people don't know this, so we're an office of Montgomery County government. We're also a very wonderful advisory committee, which consists of 15 phenomenal volunteers who provide their time and talent for 3-year terms, but they can serve up to 6-year terms. And they work with our office to provide education, outreach, advocacy, and really counsel to elected officials such as yourself, our county executive, Mark Elrich, our county council, and others who work to institute policy locally and then statewide.
So why don't you give an example of something you've done recently or program or project you're working on now?
Sure. So I'm not sure if your listeners can see this wonderful poster on the back, but one of the things that the Commission for Women does is it supports the county's Human Trafficking Prevention Committee, which
Yes.
is a separate committee from Montgomery County Commission for Women, although we do have a liaison to that committee. And that committee works exceptionally hard to reduce and prevent human trafficking in Montgomery County, of which many people think that trafficking does not happen in our county,
Mhm.
very similar to sexual assault and domestic violence.
Yep.
So we are working exceptionally hard to bring the issue to light. The poster behind me is just one example of some of the things that we've done in the county to be able to share information about where to go for help, or if you know somebody that's in trouble, to seek assistance.
That's great. Um, yeah, there was a few years ago, one of my colleagues proposed the creation of a commission for men because they worried about men being underprivileged and undersupported and under all that. Uh, Talk about women's special needs. So you talked about domestic abuse. Certainly,
Sure.
there's some men who are
Yeah.
abused. You talked
Yeah.
about sexual assault, rape, violence. Certainly, there can be men who
Yeah.
are abused. What
Yeah.
special needs do women have?
Sure. And just a caveat to that, while we all call the Commission for Women and primarily help women, men are able to serve on our board. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay,
In fact, when I was a commissioner, there was a male on the board at the time too. So we want to make sure that we include everybody in our advocacy.
okay,
But that being said, I would say some of the special needs that, at least in my 10 years in this position, or close to 10 years in this position, I've seen is that women women still struggle with divorce and separation, needing to know what their rights are, trying to find an attorney, get once they're single, whether through divorce or separation, or unfortunately, if their spouse dies, trying to get back into the workforce. So we are
Mhm.
able to help with career and resume writing and able to help individuals and guide them through the system when they're trying to get a divorce. So many of the same issues, unfortunately, that we were dealing with back in the 70s when the commission was formed,
Yes.
we're still dealing with now, although we have a lot more allies,
Mhm.
and we have more majorities of women serving, in particular in our county council. And I'm sure you can talk about this. We've seen the number of women grow in our General Assembly. So I think that really helps shed light on a lot of the issues that we're still dealing with even 20, 25 years later. Equal pay for equal work, the cost of childcare, housing, making sure that you're able to understand your divorce and your rights around divorce. So, as I said, a lot of these things still hold true that they did 20 years ago.
Talk about financial literacy. Do you all provide services? It's amazing to me. I talked to a friend recently whose dad just died and mom had never written a check before, didn't have
Yeah.
the slightest idea about financial management.
Yes, in fact, we do that about twice a year, and we work with, thankfully, we work with Montgomery County Libraries, and we have Jamie Lapin and her wonderful organization who provides that service for free. It's online, and it's usually a series of classes, and it includes Budgeting 101 for individuals who may not know how to use a check or Venmo or some of the more advanced electronic payments now,
Mhm.
don't know about Social Security, don't know about retirement, don't know about the impact of their divorce on their money. So these are all classes that individuals can take on online that are free.
I was just going to ask how much it costs. So I'm going to give a quick shout out to a constituent of mine who came to me after her husband died. They
Uh-huh.
had been for decades customers of various utilities, Comcast,
Mhm.
Pepco, and all
Mhm.
that. And because his name was on the bill and not hers, they said, you have to apply for a new account. You have to have a background check. You have to put down a deposit. We're going to close this account and open a new account. I had to sponsor and pass a bill that said, no, no, no. So if you show your marriage certificate and the death certificate, we're just going to seamlessly transfer. But anyone watching this, if you or your mother or your aunt or best friend or something isn't on the bills themselves, please. It takes a moment. Add while before there's a problem. It just is so much easier. And
Yeah.
it's also part of building your credit score is to have
Yeah.
your name on these accounts.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
No,
lecture
that's
done.
absolutely right. No, it's not so much a lecture as it is information that we
Yes,
need to pass along because we get calls similar to that. We get calls about, like I said, housing or how to open up a bank account. All, very, I would say simple things that can be
yes,
very challenging for some individuals, and we're here to help.
yes. Fantastic. As you know, there has been lots of conversations about the fiscal realities and the challenges that we're going to have in Annapolis,
Mhm.
as well as obviously in Rockville and
Yeah.
elsewhere. How will the fiscal realities, in your opinion, affect women and families in particular?
I think that's an excellent question, and I think it will be somewhat hard to say. I think if women are seeking services from nonprofits, it might be challenging for the nonprofits to continue to provide the services, especially if their grants are being cut or if they receive state funds or federal funds.
Hmm?
I think that's one thing to think about. As far as it goes for the commission helping women, we are par for the course, and we will continue to help women and their families in any way, shape, or form. We'll provide referrals and information. And if I know that there's a nonprofit that is struggling, I will certainly help connect to that nonprofit to an elected official, such as yourself, to our county executive, Mark Elrich, or to others who might be able to assist.
Great. Speaking of Mark Elrich, he was quoted recently in the press saying that the Trump administration is going to have no impact on Montgomery County, which actually made my jaw drop because I don't believe it. What do you believe would be kind of worst case scenarios of impact on women or on Montgomery County women in particular, if you've got thoughts on that, by the incoming Trump administration?
Well, I think regardless of who the president is, I think what women need to continue to do for themselves is learn how to advocate, learn what their rights are,
Amen.
and learn where to go for assistance. So whether we
Mhm.
have a Democrat in office or a Republican in office, it's critical for women to find their own voices, to collect the information that they need to advocate for themselves. And we found that to be true with reproductive rights. So even though we continue to live in Maryland, which is exceptionally supportive of women's health, we need to continue to speak up for women and to provide additional access and education about access. And I think
Yes.
that's critically important, regardless of who's in office.
While we're talking about that, Maryland is now a state that that women from other states are
Yeah.
coming. Um, Thoughts on how we get the word out, how we welcome and support these women who don't have options in their own home state?
Well, I think, I think that's another excellent question. I think that's where women really can lift up other women and
Hmm.
share the information in their own networks. Like news organizations can do what they can, nonprofits can do what they can, but when it comes to very personal decisions about reproductive health, that's when women really help women. And the only example I can give is when I have friends or even colleagues say, I have a friend who needs an abortion, I have a friend who's considering adoption. What direction can you point me in? And I think at the end of the day, it's trusting women in your network to be able to provide the information that you need.
Yes, yes. Tell me a women's issue that people don't talk enough about, that people don't pay enough attention to. Why don't you
Oh my
lift it up
gosh,
here?
there's so there are so many. Oh, there are so many. I would still go back to what I said in the beginning about sort of where I even started my career in terms of violence against women. There are still so many women who are afraid to report that they're a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault and human trafficking. And even as much as we've done as a community, people are still afraid to come forward, either for fear of what their partner might do or for fear of what their friends may think of them. In fact, I just had this conversation with a colleague yesterday about wanting to help another colleague. And I said, I've had friends who have reached out to me for help, but it's taken them a little longer than they would have liked, only because they were afraid about what I would think of them. And
Oh,
yeah, and it still bothers me to this day because my love for these friends that have experienced abuse just becomes stronger knowing that they're reaching out for help. So I say that to say if any of your constituents need help in any of those areas, it's really okay to pick up the phone and reach out for assistance. That's what the commission is here for. That's what other organizations are here for. And
yes.
the hardest thing someone can do is pick up the phone, ask for help. But what a sigh of relief um, the individual will feel. And I've often heard when somebody on the other end of the phone that says, "You're not alone. Here's how I
Mm,
can help you." So I would say
amazing.
that. I would definitely say that. Reaching out for help.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, So diversity is defined in a lot of ways. Your commission is very diverse. Why
Yes.
is that important? And I will tell you that one of my bills that I'm sponsoring next year that I
Yeah.
hope is an obvious no-brainer,
Yeah.
which is making sure. So the Moore Miller administration has been very conscientious about making sure that their boards and commissions, their nominations, their appointments have been diverse in all the ways
Yes.
geographic, gender, race, ethnicity, native language, faith, professional background. I mean, just so many different
Yes.
aspects. And that brings such a richness to a conversation, to a border commission. And so, while the Moore Miller administration has been doing a great job, we can't guarantee that every
No.
administration in the future will be that way. So it's part of one of my bills. But why don't you talk about the advantages of having diversity on your own board?
Sure. So, as I said, I support two boards, the Montgomery County Commission for Women and the Montgomery County Human Trafficking Prevention Committee. Both are extremely diverse in all of the ways that you said. But one thing I would have to share that I see a little bit more in the Human Trafficking Prevention Committee, is like diversity of thought. And I say that because being able to reduce trafficking, there's no right way, one way to do it. And
Mhm.
to end or eradicate trafficking, there's really no one way to do it. So I've had the absolute pleasure of working with law enforcement over the years who see things differently than, let's say, a victim advocate because they want to arrest the trafficker or the perpetrator. And we certainly want to see that too, because as
Sure.
you know, we've worked to improve laws in that area. But we also want to lift and support the victim and the survivor. So having diversity of thought on how to solve that problem brings about and I'm smiling because I just had a conversation yesterday. It brings about positive conflict, meaning that
Mhm.
even though you might see things differently, you're all here. We're all here for the same thing in terms of wanting to eradicate a crime, and that's why I think adding diversity of thought to your wonderful list of diverse factors to consider also helps in moving issues forward.
Fascinating. That's really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So before we start to wrap up and shift to our Fast Five, Jody, you ran for office
I
and
do.
you ran as a candidate and you also ran for an open seat for an appointment. Uh,
Yeah.
Talk about why you ran, what you learned, and then tell me what your thoughts are about the special appointment, the special elections process,
Um,
the appointment process.
let's see. The first time I ran, oh gosh, the first time I ran was a little while ago now. I think it was like 2010, 2011. And the first
Yeah.
time I ran, I was so incensed by, and it's changed. Let me add this caveat that it's changed. That the way the Senate Judiciary Committee and the House Judiciary Committee, or I should say the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee
Mhm.
and the House Judiciary Committee treated advocates and treated
Yes.
victims was
Yes.
just so atrocious
Horrible.
that, and I'm being kind.
Hmm.
There was an open seat at the time, and I really wanted to make a difference because I was so
Hmm.
incensed by what was happening. And
Hmm.
I did, and unfortunately, I did not become a delegate, but I did learn the process, and I'm so glad that I did it because
Yeah.
I never want to go through life saying shoulda, coulda, woulda, and I would
Yep.
have been more disappointed in the fact that I hadn't done it than not being successful. So even though I didn't win per se, I still came out of it with a lot more knowledge had I not gone through those experiences.
Good for you. And the appointments process, the C election rather than the election, what was that like? That's pretty different.
It was very different. It was very different. It was your I would say the people your constituents are a group of people that served on the Democratic in my experience in the Democratic Central Committee as opposed to the thousands of people that you would have had in a district. So having gone through that, I feel like it may not be a bad idea to have special elections so that way, individuals in your area and in your constituency really get to know you, and the individual who is ultimately selected is actually selected by the people who will be serving them.
By the voters.
Yes.
So
But that's not to say that the Central Committee doesn't do their best, because there have been
Oh,
wonderful people who have been, selected. But
yes,
yeah, but having gone through that experience, I think it's more important that the constituents select who's going to represent them,
yes,
than the individuals in a small group, whether it even be their Central Republican Committee or the Central
sure,
Democratic Committee.
sure.
Yeah.
So, just for the record, for anybody who's curious about this issue,
Yeah.
there have been vacancies over at various times in a four-year term. This one in District 14, where you live, was early because Eric Lukey was tapped as the governor's chief legislative officer. So it was an
Correct.
appointment for a four-year term. The Senate has passed my special elections bill, and it is coming. The House didn't move it, but we're coming back this year. And I just learned that it is going to be Senate Bill 2, which
Okay.
reflects the Senate president's commitment to this issue. So we're going
Okay.
to
I will write that down, and I will send you a support letter.
testimony. That'd be awesome. All right.
Sure.
Okay. So Jodi Finkelstein, it is time for the Fast Five.
Okay, I'm
Quick
ready.
questions, five quick answers.
Okay.
So, and shout out to my interns who helped come up with some of these questions.
Oh, interns rock. Thank you, interns.
Yay, interns. So, question number one. If you could inherit a new skill overnight, abracadabra, what would you choose?
Oh gosh. Oh, you're gonna laugh at this because it has nothing to do with advocacy or anything
All
that we
right.
talked about. But I would love to be a sommelier for champagne.
Wow, that's
Yes,
cool.
yes.
We are in the holiday season. Question two. What is your favorite family holiday tradition?
Oh, my grandmother used to make what's called mundo bread, and the only way
Uh-huh.
I can describe that is similar to biscotti,
Mhm.
but maybe a little softer.
Good
And so our
analogy.
whole family gets together and makes the mundo bread my grandmother used to make. Yeah.
I love that. Question number three. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, whom would you choose?
Um, well, I'm gonna have to say two people.
Okay.
One,
Peter.
well, it is, but you'll see why. My grandfather, my mom's mom, who I'm actually named after, Joseph, who I never got to meet because he died when my mom was younger, so I never got to meet him.
Mm,
And then Eleanor Roosevelt, who
nice.
I have a poster on my wall in my office.
Love it. Question number four. What is an anthem, a song that lifts you up and inspires you?
Oh, so many. So many. I think the one that I can think of right off the top of my head that always makes me smile is Sweet Caroline.
Nice. Neil
Yeah,
Diamond.
yeah.
Okay. Question number five. Jodi Finkelstein, Director of the Montgomery County Commission for Women. What is your hidden secret superpower? What is a skill or talent you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
Well, my background is social work, so I would say that I am very intuitive and a very good active listener.
Nice. Those are great skills.
Yes, thank you.
Well, Jodi, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for your almost 10 years of leadership of our Commission for Women and for being such an advocate for women and girls and families. You have been recognized three times as one of Maryland's top 100 women and inducted into the Circle of Excellence, which is a huge honor that I was
Thank you.
also
Yes,
fortunate
as you
to.
were as well. Yes,
Yes, so it's a pretty cool thing. So thank you
thank
for all you
you.
do, and I look forward to seeing you and continuing to work with you in the near future.
Thank you. It's a pleasure working with you and always kibitzing. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jodi. Stay well.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.